Yeah, I guess you can say I'm a fan. Super Saiyan-Tember 2 starts now!
Don't stop, we're in luck now. Don't stop, there's so much to be found. We can find paradise. All we have to do is go free your soul. Dragon Soul!
Yup, it's finally that time. What's up? What's happening? What's going on? Welcome back to Animation Station, your #1 stop destination for anything and everything animation. I need to bring this closer. There we go. That should be better. And yup, it's that time. Dragon Ball time. As you guys know, I believe it was last year, I tried to do this marathon where I talked about all the Dragon Ball Z movies, from World's Strongest all the way up to DBS Broly. But unfortunately, back then, life kind of got in the way, and it ended up just not happening. So I ended up just doing a tier list and leaving it at that. And I also reviewed the first movie, too. Now, that review definitely hasn't aged very well, I'm going to say. I have rewatched it. It's not very good. But my thoughts about that movie haven't changed. It's still a 7 out of 10. It's still a solid movie. It's still a really good first start to these movies of the Z era. But I will admit that review hasn't aged well. But because of time, and because I'm throwing in the sagas into this marathon as well, I'm not going to be re-reviewing it. So if you guys want to check out that review, the link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So instead, we're going to start off with the second of the Dragon Ball Z movies today, and that is World's Strongest, the second movie in the Z era, and the one that's become a pretty big fan favorite over the years. Heck, I'm pretty sure when Team 4 Star did their top 24 movies and specials way back when for DBCember, back when DBCember was still around, rest in peace DBCember, that movie was number 2 on their list, just behind Battle of Gods. And I can kind of understand why, but I will admit, on this most recent rewatch, I have noticed a lot more flaws than I normally do. This one's also going to be a bit more analytical and constructive than my old reviews, so it's going to be more like the DC Lion Cowabunga Cavalcade reviews you've been seeing me do, where I pull up the summary online, I read through it, I talk about the voice acting, and then I finish off with the written review. And well as add any little nitpicks or gripes I just need to discuss. So it's going to be a long video. Sit down, grab a popcorn, grab a drink, and we're going to go ahead and get started. This is my review of World's Strongest. I'm going to tell you right now, it's pretty positive. But I'm not telling you the final score until the end, because otherwise I would completely ruin the point of this video. So let's start with the summary of the entire movie. And yes, spoiler alert, I'm going in full depth spoilers with these reviews, so watch at your own risk. These movies have been out for years now, guys. These came out in the 90s. Okay? Catch up. So, this time I brought up the DBZ wiki instead of IMDb, because IMDb I've seen is pretty unreliable. So, we'll just go from here. This is just a basic summary. The movie begins with Gohan and Oolong searching for the Dragon Balls that have all been gathered in the frozen Sumari Subri Mountains. Sorry, I know Oolong said it in the movie, but I'm still very bad at pronouncing things. A place where the ice never melts. Though he hasn't told Gohan, Oolong secretly plans on wishing for comfy underwear. A nice callback to way back in the very first arc of Dragon Ball, where that was the wish that Oolong made to the dragon to separate the Dragon Balls right before Pilaf could wish for world domination, as you do. Before they reach them, Shenron is summoned by Dr. Kochin, who wishes for Dr. Wheelo in their laboratory to be thawed from the ice. Later, when Gohan and Oolong approach the laboratory, they are ambushed by several Biomen, who are just recolored Cybermen, let's not even try to dance around that fact, and are knocked out, but Piccolo, who is training in the area nearby, shows up and saves them. However, he is then ambushed by 3 mysterious warriors, and the resulting attack causes the ground beneath them to give way, burying Gohan and Oolong. and also gets Piccolo captured in this weird red beam of light. It gets explained later on what it actually is, but it's still not the greatest of explanations. So I'll talk more about that later. Like I said, I'm starting with just the basic summary. After regaining consciousness, they return home after Gohan promises Oolong to keep their chip a secret. Meanwhile, at the Kami house, Oolong is preparing a meal for Bulma to make up for destroying the Dragon Radar during their little ice adventure, while several Biomen, again, just recolored Cybermen, show up asking for Master Roshi. Refusing to go along with them, they attack him, but they are easily defeated, because it's Master Roshi. I mean, that shouldn't surprise anybody if you know your actual Dragon Ball. Kochin then appears, thinking that Roshi is the strongest in the world. Yeah, I think your data banks are a bit outdated, buddy. And when Biomen put Bulma's life in danger, Roshi agrees to go along with them. Witnessing the entire event, Oolong goes to Goku's house and tells him what happened. While Goku is, of course, being Goku and taking his bath by by just standing upright in this giant barrel full of lava over a fire pit. If you know Goku, that's a running gag that should be very familiar to you, and Gohan even later adapts it, in his kid form. Obviously, when he's an adult, he outgrows that, but still, it's pretty funny. And if you know your Dragon Ball history, you know how deep cut of a reference that is. Where else are we? Goku then sets off on the flying Nimbus towards the Sumrite Zubri Mountains to save Roshi and Bulma. Because this is early Z, this is when he still has his flying Nimbus and his power pole. So, this is before even Super Saiyans come around, people. You don't see him go Super Saiyan in the movies until the 5th one. Just a heads up right now, if you're about to say, well, he can just go Super Saiyan and destroy everything. This is way before that even happened. And yes, I know technically all these movies, with the exception of Battle of Gods onward, are all not canon, but it's still just an explanation if you guys are wondering, because I know people that start with Z and then go backwards are like, where's Super Saiyan? Where's Super Saiyan? That's your explanation. It doesn't exist yet currently in this version of the timeline. At Dr. Wheelo's fortress, Kochin tests Roshi against his bio-warriors Kishime, Ebitheria, and Misokatsune. Again, I'm terrible at pronouncing things, I'm sorry. And despite putting up a decent fight while being outnumbered, he is ultimately defeated. Bulma then reveals to Wheelo and Kochin that Goku is in fact the strongest in the world, and Kochin in turn reveals their plan to have Wheelo's brilliant scientific mind take over the body of the strongest fighter in the world, where he will then be able to reign over the world as revenge for all the humans who refuse to acknowledge his genius and cast him aside. So yeah, it's the tried and true horror movie mad scientist cliche. Which isn't a bad thing in this case. It's actually pretty interesting. But, I mean, if you've seen this kind of plot before, it would seem very familiar to you. So, because these movies aren't wholly original. They're either taking inspiration from other media, or just ripping off the current sagas that are airing at the time. So, yeah, that's a huge strike against it, but we'll talk about that later. Where was I? At that moment, Goku is detected approaching the fortress to Bulma's relief and Wheelo's pleasure. Going against his mother's wishes, Gohan secretly leaves his house and follows his father, and, spoiler alert, takes Krillin with him. After Goku arrives at Wheelo's fortress, he is attacked by the fortress's built-in traps and Mitsukatsune, but destroys all the traps with rapid energy blasts and easily defeats Mikokatsune with his Kaioken. But not before he exclaims about how he thinks he's fighting a literal marshmallow. Because, it's Goku. He's a good fighter, but he's very oblivious sometimes. And that's one of the things that makes him likable, because he is really smart fight-wise, but he can also be really stupid and oblivious. Which gives way for some nice humor. And if you've watched since the original Dragon Ball, you would understand that's a part of his character. He is then attacked by Kishime and Ebitheria and ends up entombed in ice. Just before the deciding blow is thrown, Gohan, along with Krillin, again, I already told you, show up. They too are soon defeated, and then having no choice, Goku once again uses the Kaioken to break the ice and defeat the remaining Bio Warriors. One of the coolest moments in the movie, by the way, because you see him like this anger starting to rise out of him as he focuses, and you see that red glow, and then you hear him shout Kaioken, or Kaioken in this case. I know that's something else I need to adjust a little bit. There are two different ways that people say Kaioken. There's Kaioken and Kaioken. It kind of just depends. Neither one's wrong. It's just a bit hard to keep track of. So, anyone that's confused about that, that's your explanation. It's either Kaioken or Kaioken. I always use Kaioken because it just sounds better to me, in my personal opinion. Oh, wait, actually, hold on. Before I go any further, I should show this, since I'm over here. And this will also give you a bit of a visual representation of what the Kaioken looks like on Goku. It looks like this. That's Goku's Kaioken, when not added on top of a bunch of his other forms. So, yeah. That was his main power-up before Super Saiyan. The three then arrive at Wheelo's lab where Bulma is being held, asking where Roshi is. Kochan explains he's preparing him to become another one of his Bio Warriors. They summon the newly brainwashed Piccolo, who was captured earlier. Of course, after they attempt to capture Goku with that same red light from earlier that makes all these like black bands appear around him. But Goku being Goku, he breaks it. Because he's Goku. I keep losing my spot, and I'm sorry. They summon the newly brainwashed Piccolo, who was captured earlier, as I already stated, and order him to defeat Goku so they can begin the process of swapping his mind for Wheelo's. Goku and Piccolo then fight each other. I mean, if you've seen the original fight between these two at the very end of the original Dragon Ball, this should make you smile a heck of a lot, because it's a pretty cool rematch. It's not as great as that first fight, but it's really cool. And it's really nice and unexpected. But Gohan's anger over seeing Piccolo being in control causes him to unleash a wave of energy, which causes the mind-controlling device on Piccolo to break, and it also shatters the ground a little bit. Yeah, here's the thing with Z. It keeps building up to Gohan becoming the main protagonist of the franchise. That's why it's literally called Z. It's meant to be like the end of Goku's story and the start of Gohan's, but because Goku became so popular, they ended up throwing that away and Gohan became a side character. It's a bit sad, but we'll get all into that mess when we get into the Buu saga. Way, way later down in this marathon. What else are we? Kochan tries to shoot Krillin because he's also revealed to be an android and has a literal Gatling gun for a hand. I'm not kidding. It's a literal Gatling gun, and it's amazing. He tries to shoot Krillin and Bulma with his machine gun arm, but is disarmed by Roshi with one simple chop. Willow then breaks out of the wall, revealing his brain to be inside a huge robot, and Kochan dies in the resulting reveal. Because he's fed up with Kochan at this point. He tried to get him to stop antagonizing Gohan, but it didn't work. And then when Kochan felt his power wave, he's like, oh, I must have it. So he throws his own assistant aside and bursts out of the wall. And it's a really cool design, too. Like, it's literally just a brain inside a giant metal suit. And the suit itself is really cool, too. Again, really taking in those horror sci-fi inspirations and wearing them like a badge of honor. Realizing that he was being controlled, Piccolo attacks Willow, only to be brushed aside with a single smack. Because Willow here, even in this robot suit with just a brain and no actual head, he's pretty freaking powerful. As Willow jumps into the air, Goku, Krillin, and Roshi fire multiple Kamehamehas, which does nothing to Willow, who then proceeds to take out both Roshi and Krillin. Gohan attempts to attack Willow with the Power Pole, but is knocked out before he can. Goku then uses the Power Pole to trip Willow's robot body, and Piccolo launches a wave of energy blasts at him, but to no avail. With no other choice, Goku uses the ×3 Kaioken, starts to cause damage to Wheelo before attempting to finish him off with the Kaioken Kamehameha. However, Wheelo's own blast is able to overwhelm it, which forces Goku to increase to Kaioken ×4 to blast Wheelo into space. Okay, this is a little thing I need to talk about, and it did kind of bug me a little bit when I figured it out. A few parts from this specific moment are reused animation scenes from his battle with Vegeta in the Saiyan saga. Don't believe me? Think about it. When it goes to the close-up and he says, "You can't win," the lip-syncing still makes you think he's saying Kaioken ×4. It's shot in the same way, and then when, he feels the impact of that ×4 Kamehameha, and you see his hand go back, that's, again, the same exact thing. And then the way it also shows, his gi tearing off. Yeah, it's literally reused shots from the Saiyan saga, just recolored a little bit. It's still cool, it's just something that's a little bit odd to see. Because I don't remember the Z movies ever reusing the same animation, outside of the basic model design, of course. Where is it? Wheelo decides to destroy the Earth, and so does Goku, and so Goku starts to collect energy from around the world to form a spirit bomb. This isn't like the massive spirit bombs you're used to with this show. It's like the little ones you saw at, the Saiyan saga, when he gives a little one to Krillin to finish off Vegeta with, which we'll talk about later. Way later down in this marathon. However, he is attacked from above before he can launch it. Angry, Gohan, along with Piccolo and Krillin, head up toward Wheelo to attempt to stop him, to little success. And this is also one of those parts where Krillin is treated like garbage in the movies. That's sadly a bit of a running gag, and it is a huge bummer. But considering how insignificant power-wise he's become in the past few years, it makes sense. Especially when Super Saiyans are introduced. Yeah, at that point, he really is very much a side character, so it doesn't annoy me as much as it annoys other people. And where's it? Head upward toward Wheelo to attempt to stop him, to little success, and he attacks the Earth with his planet geyser energy wave. He doesn't actually call it that in the movie, it's just what it ends up being called by the fanbase, so yeah, there's that. Goku, having collected himself, launches the spirit bomb at Wheelo, which he somehow reformed very quickly, which is a little bit confusing considering the fact it takes a while to even get that little ball in his hand to even form in the first place. But you know what? You gotta mess with the lore a little bit to get a cool ending. You gotta mess with the lore a little bit to get a cool ending. Goku, having collected himself, launches a spirit bomb at Wheelo, destroying both Wheelo's energy wave and Wheelo himself, as well as destroying the entire lab. Which, I know the lab was technically already destroyed when he launched his giant energy attack from above. But, yeah. There you go. And that's pretty much the movie. Then it just ends on a funny Roshi being a dirty old man joke. So, yeah, that's the movie. Overall, the story's really good here, but you can see a few little instances where it took some parts from the actual anime and put them into a bit of more of a movie format. But what's great about this one in particular is that it doesn't feel like a straight-up rip-off of something like the Saiyan saga, for example, because it doesn't, well, outside of the reused animation, because the story is usually, at this point, entirely pretty original, even though it later becomes the Android saga. It has a nice horror and sci-fi theme to it, and while there aren't any Super Saiyans or anything like that, it's still really exciting, tense, dark, and again, it's literally just a brain, a guy with no head and just a brain in a giant robot suit fighting a super-powered alien. You get what you get with that, so yeah. And as for the timeline placement, if you're trying to put this into the canon, which in reality you shouldn't, but it's fun to discuss with the fanbase. Due to Goku's doji having a Kame mark on the chest and a Kaio mark on the back, this is an event from after his battle with Vegeta, but before Goku's arrival on planet Namek. Gohan has a flashback to when Piccolo defended him from Nappa's attack. So this pretty much takes place immediately after the events of the Saiyan saga and before the Namek/Frieza saga. So yeah, take what you can get with that. It's a little bit confusing. That's why I'm just saying, just take these movies as their own separate thing. Don't try to just compare it or connect it to the canon, because it ain't gonna work out very well for you if you try. So, yep. Now let's move on to the English voice cast, and I'm going to be talking specifically about the Funimation cast, because I'm watching these movies from the remastered movie 5-pack that got released a long time ago, which took out the licensed music. So for example, you're not going to hear Stupefy by Disturbed during the fight with Lord Slug, but that's a minor little inconvenience because the movies themselves translated really well. They didn't at all do the same horrible crap that they did with the remasters of the actual anime. I mean, that's a whole history in itself that I sadly don't have time to talk about, but if you know your Dragon Ball history and you know how terrible Z has been released on multiple times in the physical media market, you would already know that whole story and that whole debacle. But movies-wise, they did a pretty good job remastering them and doing a good job, bringing them to physical media. The movies actually turned out pretty good on DVD, which surprised even me, considering the fact that they apparently can't even release the original Z correctly. So yeah, this is what I'm watching it off of, and on this, it's the Funimation dub. So I'm not going to talk about the AB dub, I'm not going to talk about the Japanese version or the Ocean dub, because I know that there was an Ocean dub version of this, but it never got released to physical media, and it just aired on Funimation, not Funimation, it aired on Toonami way back when once, and then was just gone from history. So because of that, I feel like it's easiest and simplest to just talk about it as the Funimation dub. So for the Funimation dub, let's go over the casts a little bit. You have Sean Shamwell's Goku, which I'll talk more about another day. Stephanie Nadolny as Kid Gohan. Christopher Sabat as Piccolo. And yes, obviously he also voices Vegeta later on, but that's a whole other story. Sonny Street is Krillin. Tiffany Vollmer is Bulma, which is interesting, considering the fact that nowadays it's been Monica Rial, but back then it was Tiffany Vollmer, starting from the original Dragon Ball, I believe all the way up towards the end of Z, if I'm getting my history correct, which I'm probably not, but, I mean, I'm trying. Give me credit. Oolong's voiced by Brad Jackson, Chi-Chi is Cynthia Kranz, and Master Roshi is Mike McFarlane, and then Christopher Sabat is Turtle. And then for the other voices, and also Shenron is also voiced by Christopher Sabat, because Christopher Sabat's like the big main voice actor out of everyone here, outside of Sean Schimmel himself. Then you have the Biomen, who are also voiced by Christopher Sabat. And then you have Dr. Cochin, who's voiced by Troy Baker, which if you know from my SpongeBob reviews, you should already know who Troy Baker is. Which I believe it's SpongeBob, right? I'm pretty sure it's SpongeBob where he mainly comes from. Kishime is voiced by Chris Rager, Epifuria is voiced by Matthew Tompkins, Mitsu Katsun is voiced by Robert McCullum, and then Dr. Wheelo is voiced by Bruce Elliott. He's pretty good, and I really like Troy Baker's very deranged, psychotic, evil Dr. Cochin. Like, that part definitely makes him a bit more memorable than most of these throwaway movie villains. And there's also a few good fights in the movie, so yeah, overall, the cast is really good here. Most of them are, again, carries over from the actual anime, as well as a few new additions, some other actors taking in a couple other roles. The voice acting here is really good. I mean, it's Dragon Ball. It's rarely ever just flat out bad. Okay, so I talked about the voice cast, I did a summary, I talked about some of my gripes and some facts, so I guess we'll just go straight to my written review now. Wow, it's not even been an hour. Wow, I don't know how I'm able to do these so quickly. So, let's begin. And this written review is also going to be really short because I tried to be a little less descriptive in my written reviews, outside of my actual movie reviews, whereas these are just direct-to-DVD, one-off, super short films. So, here we go. Great voice acting, stellar action, superb story that became a template for the Android saga of Z to follow afterwards, solid villains, a great ending, some funny moments, again, really funny moment at the end. An unexpected but awesome Goku vs. Piccolo rematch that brings back vibes of the original Dragon Ball. Very creative designs, an awesome Arctic setting that we rarely ever see in Dragon Ball. I think the only other times that we've seen them fight in the Arctic is in Super Android 13 and in DBS Broly. So, yeah, it's very rare whenever we see them fight in the Arctic, which is bizarre, but it's still cool. Strong writing, fantastic pacing. Like, this movie's very fast. Like, it has a little bit of a slow start, but it picks up really quick and it gets real fast, real quick. A great sense of suspense and danger, and a ton of homages to the old school sci-fi horror movies of the late 80s. If you grew up watching those, or if you've watched those recently, if you're a horror fan, you're going to notice a lot of those inspirations in here. Like I said, Kochin and Wheelo are the classic evil mad scientist cliche that you've seen 1,000 times in other horror films like it. The whole sci-fi theme with the evil lair and everything brings back more memories of, again, classic horror. Like, if you are paying attention while you're watching, you're going to notice a lot of references to horror movies and science fiction. So, it's pretty fascinating. And not to mention, DBZ's actual relationship with the horror genre is very fascinating. It's very in-depth, and I sadly can't just talk about it in one big review, but look it up for yourself. It's very, very interesting. And I will be making a lot of horror references in these reviews. But I won't be able to go in-depth fully of how much horror influenced the actual franchise. So, yeah. Take what you can get there. Its only flaws are pretty minor. The villains lack dimension and complexity, even though I love their designs and voice acting. A few random scenes that have nothing to do with the story, like Gohan's weird daydream scene. It's weird. You remember that scene in World's Strongest where Gohan got drunk off of apples while he was stuck in Gorok's fortress? Yeah, it's kind of like that, except it's not as awkward, and it doesn't have a terrible song. So, yeah, you get what you get with that. The very slow start, the start here is very slow, but stick with it. It starts out slow, but it gets really good really quick, so yeah, just stick with it. And the runtime being way too short to fully maximize the potential of the concept. Yeah, this movie is only what? How long is this movie? Let me get out the DVD real quick. How long is this movie? And also, for a release date, it came out in 1989. So. Oh yeah, DVD's in the okay. I'll just say it's about an hour, if that. It's a very short movie. And because it's short, it doesn't really have the ability to fully maximize the potential of the concept that it's given, but it does what it can with it. It's, again, like I said, the gripes here are very minor. It's more nitpicks than actual, crushing flaws like you will see when I review Tree of Might tomorrow. That one has a lot of problems. What else? Oh, yeah. Back in my original Top 10 DBZ Movies list, which you would have seen if you subscribed to Luminous Saiyan 27, what this channel previously was before, it became this. I had this movie all the way up at number 2 on the list. Now I'd say it's probably around a solid number 5. Even with that said, though, as both a huge DBZ fan and a massive fan of old-school horror movies, I absolutely love this one. While I wish it was a little longer and the villains had a bit more to them outside of, just being your typical throwaway evil villains. Everything else more than made up for it, and I always have a fantastic time watching it. Highly recommended. It's an absolute blast. Yeah. Don't let the short runtime or the fact that it's direct-to-DVD fool you. World's Strongest is a great movie. It's fast-paced, it's short, it's to the point, and it's just giving you more Dragon Ball Z action. So, yeah, I mean, sure, it's not wholly original. Sure, there's a few things it stole from the series. Again, the reused animation. But outside of that, it's really good, it's very solid, and I personally have a great time with it. I don't think it's like the number 2 best movie in the franchise anymore, like, like Team 4 Star did and like how I did on my original list. I still think, though, this is a great film, and I think that if you are a Dragon Ball fan, and especially if you're a horror fan, you gotta check this one out. My final verdict for Dragon Ball Z: The World's Strongest is going to be a high 8 out of 10. Definitely recommended. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. It's available in multiple different ways for pretty cheap, so yeah, check it out if you haven't already. It's a fantastic movie, it's a lot of fun, and it's very short. Like, don't think this is like a 2-3 hour movie like we get nowadays. No, this movie is like a little bit over an hour, if that. It's a pretty short movie, but it's a very fun movie as well. You're going to have a great time with it. Just don't go in expecting things like Super Saiyan, and you'll have a great time. So, yeah, in other words, final verdict, final thoughts, you'll have a great time. Well, that's it for this review. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned because, well, we still have a long way to go with this marathon because we have a full 31 days of reviews coming. Well, 30 days now if you're watching this. But, yeah, it's going to be a pretty wild ride. And I will be talking both about the pros and the cons of pretty much this entire series. Again, except for the original Dragon Ball movies, which I don't have time for. GT, I don't want to put myself through that suffering, and Evolution because there's no way I'd be able to post that review without a million F-bombs, so yeah, I'm making it easy on myself and skipping over the really bad stuff. But we're still going to have a few little negatives here and there, especially with the next review, which sadly has always just not been one of my favorites, but you know what, it has its fans, I'm just not one of them, so I'll see you guys next time when we talk about Tree of Might and the crushing disappointment that it continues to be even all these years later. But until then, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Jasmine of Animation Station. Stay Super Saiyan, and I'll see you in the next review. Peace.